emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 692.JB1117, certificate number 38756, Korean Age.
생일 축하합니다. 생일 축하합니다. 사랑하는 우리 자기. 생일 축하합니다.
Truly, we're living in the Korean age.
I say that all the time.
Have you noticed?
Well, yeah, all pop music is from Korea now. All good pop music.
It's not just pop music. Like somehow they also got movies, prestige TV, melodrama TV, food, fashion, video games.
The food. Oh, I watched the one where the people in jumpsuits killed each other.
That's what it's called. The Korean characters, the Hangul says, the one where people in jumpsuits kill each other. And in England and in the US, they're like, nobody will watch that. We have to call it Squid Game.
And I'm not sure why they called it Squid Game, but I watched it.
It explains. It's like the first scene of the first episode.
Oh, it's a squid.
Kids are playing a little playground game that looked like a Foursquare game that looks like a squid.
I remember now, and that comes up later in the show, right?
Call back.
But I was watching it here with the family, not the younger members, but the older members.
You're not corrupting the youth.
And it was too violent for them, so they bailed. Toward the end, I mean, we watched.
I mean, at the end of the first episode, just like 150 people just die with bloody gunshots.
Yeah, we watched 9 episodes, and that was the point that they punched out. And I don't actually care about anything enough to like persevere, so I never watched the end either. And it was, it was starting to get there was all kinds of plot happening, but it fell out of my mind like so many other things.
The hyperviolence is something it has in common with a lot of the other 21st century kind of Korean neo-noir movies.
Right.
Real big stylized violence and even gore and even, I don't know, like revenge porn, horror, thriller stuff.
Is that true of
Koreans?
No.
Yeah, they're always just luring people to an island and shooting them up. They can't get enough of it.
I mean, is it, does it have an antecedent? Is it true in Korean culture post-war?
That's what's interesting about living in the age of Hallyu, or what Koreans call the Korean wave, their kind of outreach of cultural power, is that it's not true. In general, pre-modern, pre-contact Korean culture is jolly and cheery. Huh. It's like it's animals and tigers and rabbits living together in the woods. The folk songs are kind of, maybe they're a little bit mournful or bittersweet, but nothing like the complex mix of genres that goes into a lot of Korean art today. And it's because there was a sea change. Korea was a hermit kingdom until 1905. I mean, today we call North Korea the hermit kingdom. But if you had asked somebody 100 years ago, what's the hermit kingdom? Like the Chosun leaders of Korea were intentionally the Japan play, basically.
Yeah, right.
We got this foreign influence creeping. It's obvious that this is a paradigm shift. We need to maintain our trade and our economy, and what we're going to do is we're going to close the borders.
That's what I've done here at my house in Normandy Park. You might call it a hermit kingdom.
Yeah, it is a hermit kingdom.
Yeah.
You're worried about cultural influences, like
I don't want
like the 10th episode of Squid Game.
I don't want any of it getting in. when somebody rings my doorbell, I look at my little security camera, and 9 times out of 9, I go,
Has K-pop gotten into your family culture? Do you have a kid who's into K-pop?
No, because there's no access. There's no portal that's open where K-pop can get in.
Oh, she doesn't have a phone yet.
Right. She doesn't have a phone yet, and she goes to Montessori school. So the kids there are way behind in terms of adopting contemporary culture.
How far back does Montessori leave you? Like, what are they really into right now?
I mean,
they just got into Cherry Poppin' Daddies and that 90s lounge revival.
In my kids' estimation, half of the class is into Minecraft, and that's all they care about. And that feels like 2012.
Yeah, when Roblox hits that school, look out.
And then she said the other day, she was like, I want to watch some memes. Can you show me some memes? And I was like, memes? And she was like, yeah, show me some memes. And so I was like, I can has cheeseburger. And she was like, what is this? And I was like, it's a meme. I was like,
you had to start her from the beginning.
Yeah, I was like, here's some memes. And like, here's the...
That's like what you would show an alien who came to Earth and said, we want to see your memes.
Like, I don't know. Here. And what she was talking about was TikTok. And
she wants to see TikTok dances.
Yeah, and kids are what she's encountering is that thing that there was always that one hippie kid in school that didn't have a TV and didn't watch Happy Days, and so they'd come to school and everybody would go, "Hey, sit on it, Potsy," and the one kid is like, "What is that? What does that mean?" That's a reference for a very small segment of our audience. Hey, sit on it, Potsy. But kids are starting to say like, chili whack, and my kid doesn't know what that means. And then they're like, what? It's a meme.
Plus, it's much harder because it's literally a new thing every 2 days or every 12 hours.
So she came to me as her authorized media representative and wanted me to show her memes. And I didn't even know how to find them. Like, I'm not on TikTok. And if I were on TikTok, I wouldn't know how to find Chili Whack.
This is our first show of the new year, I believe, which is kind of why I chose
Hey, Happy New Year,
January
everyone.
1st related topic. But spoilers, did your daughter get a phone for Christmas?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
She has an iPod, which is, I think, a discontinued technology.
I think so too.
But it does let her watch Adventure Time because it has video capacity. And she's been watching Monty Python on it. And then it has music. But no, we got a landline here.
Yeah.
And I call it every day from my house. And she picks it up.
Do you think it'll stop working if you don't call every day?
Well, no, I just want to give her the fun experience because it's hers. Nobody else calls it. So I call it and I let it ring because I know she's running from whatever side of the house. And she's been practicing different ways to answer it, like Roderick residence. Or, like, hello, or, like the way you answer your phone. This is Ken.
Congrats on bringing her into the 1890s.
I know. If it was just my decision, I think I might have gotten her a phone. But her mother is like, no phones. Because she's afraid. She's afraid of all the terrible things that creep in.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. Even if your kids don't get, menaced by stalkers and pervs, there's still the fact that my kids used to love to read books.
Yeah.
I went to the library religiously every week, and then they got phones.
A couple of our mutual friends that have kids just a couple of years older than mine talk about how they go on road trips now and their kid is in the backseat taking selfies and sending them to their friends on some app that if you don't, I guess it's Snapchat, that it's made to keep your kid not just zoomed in on the app, but to feel like real social pressure to be there all the time.
Yeah.
And
that's healthy.
Yeah. And my friends are just lamenting it. Like, oh my God, it's metastasized in their life. Metastasized, I guess, is what a futureling would yell at me as his
I was just watching a movie last night and somebody said anesthetized for anesthetized for anesthetized, and they just left it in the movie, and I was like, anesthetized. Okay, so that's like maybe you were the pronunciation consultant on this movie.
For 30 years, I have said metastasize, and I've also said metastasize as two separate words.
You didn't realize they were the same word?
Well, just depending on, like where I was.
I thought metafiction and metafiction were two things.
No, you didn't.
No, I did not. That's true. Well, I mean, the adoption of digital technologies by young people is a huge part of the story of Hallyu, the Korean expanse of cultural influence worldwide. And just to kind of run down, just to convince people who are not aware, perhaps they are not from our time period, of just
Right.
how
Maybe they had hippie
quick
parents.
and how remarkably and how unusually this takeover of world culture was. Since 2012, Psy's single Gangnam Style has had 4 billion views.
Gangnam Style.
Yeah, or Gangnam Style.
Oppa Gangnam Style.
You keep
Or
saying
Gangnam.
you keep saying Gangnam Style like you're correcting my Korean.
But it's Gangnam Style.
Yeah, it's Gangnam.
But doesn't he say Gangnam Style?
I don't think so.
Isn't that what all of our
That sounds like what a BBC announcer telling you about it would say.
Gangnam Style?
And of course, the subsequent explosion of fashion forward, teen beloved K-pop groups, cute non-threatening boys and
They are cute.
and girl groups. BTS was the top selling band in the world last year, more than Taylor Swift, more than anybody.
It's insane because we always called Built to Spill BTS, and the first probably 600 references to BTS I read as Built to Spill
You're
just
like,
sold a
which BTS members' makeup look do you like better? And you're like, wow, I have thoughts on this.
BTS just sold 1 million tickets in Indonesia. And I'm like, did they really?
Parasite won Best Picture. So now it's not just these stylized neo-noirs. Now it's art films of all kinds.
Now, Parasite is one where I started to watch it. I got halfway through it and I punched out. And I'm not sure why. I think it was too easy to watch. It was something I was watching on my computer instead of having paid to see. And I got up to get a sandwich and then I never went back.
There is a thing where if you didn't pay to see it, you'll be like, let me just hold up a second screen and play Wordle during this important part of this movie.
Yeah, so I did. So I have no idea how that ended.
You might have clocked out before the twist.
I did. I clocked out before the twist, and I think it was making me nervous. It was making me uncomfortable enough that when I looked over at my computer sitting open, I was like,
just because the protagonists were Asian, you were like,
yeah, definitely.
No,
No, I was uncomfortable because it just seemed like we were headed to
a mood of
a bad
foreboding.
place. Yeah,
you don't want to see bad things happen to upper middle class people in nice houses.
that's right. I identified with the rich people.
Korean dramas first caught on in the West kind of for their melodramatic and maybe kind of anachronistic qualities.
You mean like shoot 'em ups or what? What do you mean dramas?
No, these were like these were soaps basically.
Oh,
This would be like kind of Jane Austen type light entertainment for moms and aunts, but set in a Korean village.
when did those catch on in the West? Was I not? Where was I?
You were not notified.
I guess not. Was that a thing that was on daytime television? Or?
It's definitely a kind of thing that you could miss if you were not hooked into youth culture. Just as today, if you asked a 55-year-old who's the biggest band in the world, maybe they could not name a K-pop band.
Rolling Stones.
Yeah, I believe. I'm going to say the Rolling Stones.
Guns N'
Bob.
Roses. So now, is this an episode that you're doing? Is this one of your pandering to Generation Z because we never do any Gen Z episodes?
I guess it could be. I mean, here's the thing. Gen Z is going to be disappointed because I'm not going to get into
the ins and outs of BTS.
Yeah, to anyone getting back together or, who the cutest member of 17 is. I don't, let me tell you, and let me be upfront about why. It's because I don't care. we got an angry note about our Twilight show. That,
we got a lot of angry
that we
notes.
should just stay away from people. Well, I don't know if we did. I only saw this one email, but
maybe it's just letters to me.
Yeah, this is to your house.
Dear sir,
this was somebody who was like, if this is what representation is, I would rather not have middle-aged white men talking about my fandoms.
What were we representing?
It's not clear.
It's only white people in that show, right? Or the protagonists are all.
Yes, and I was asking my kids, I was like, hey, is Twilight queer culture? Is this what we got wrong? And they were like, not really. I mean, I guess.
It's pretty straight.
For some people, but the sexual politics are so regressive that.
So
anyway.
After we did that episode, my kid came to me and said, I want to watch Twilight. And I said, I just did a whole thing with Ken on it. I'll watch it with you. And we watched it.
You now have Twilight takes.
I have watched
this episode,
Twilight.
This Korean show just got half an hour longer.
I have hot takes on Twilight, namely that it is terrible.
See, this is the kind of thing.
Oh, right.
That
I'm
this
not
person
supposed to
did
have
not
this take.
like.
Oh, right. Because I'm yucking their yum.
Yes. Why even do a show if you're just going to say this is bad art? And why is it popular?
It's funny because
I think that was the subtext of much of the Twilight shows. This is not great art. Let's explain the phenomenon.
I've been making anti Mrs. Doubtfire comments on Roderick on the Line, and I got a couple of strongly worded emails about that. That's my favorite movie.
From the Doubtheads?
Yeah, and I was like, wow. But you know what? We punched out of that before the end. So we didn't get the twist.
Have you ever seen the end of a movie? You didn't know it was Robin Williams the whole time?
No, we knew that.
This nice lady is taking care of his kids.
What I didn't understand was Pierce Brosnan was set up as the villain through the whole movie, except he was really nice to everybody, and he seemed like a really nice guy. And I was like, how are they going to make him the bad guy, which is inevitable here? And then somebody turned me on, spoiler alert, to the plot twist that Pierce Brosnan, future James Bond, future at the time, was not the bad guy. He turns out
it's actually the crazy dad who cross dresses to sneak into people's houses.
Yeah, we punched out because
doing the bad thing.
I think my kid did not find Robin Williams' character at all sympathetic. She felt that he was a creep.
That's probably true.
Sorry, everyone.
Korean food, when I was growing up there, I'm not even trying segues anymore.
No, it's fine. I don't. It's the new year.
Speaking of Mrs. Doubtfire, which is set in San Francisco, which is in California, the beachhead of Korean food arriving on these shores.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm. Good.
You got your money's worth that time.
Korean food, when you were eating it, when you were living in Korea, I assume was fairly.
I grew up in Korea in the early '80s, and if you had asked me, will this food ever catch on? I would have said, you mean with me? No.
A bibimbap? You never liked it?
We ate Korean food all the time, and I liked plenty of Korean food, but it did not strike me as the kind of thing that American palates would one day not be able to get enough of, because their staple is this very pungent, pickled, fermented stuff. You know, in the West, we don't hate pickled cabbage, and we don't hate red pepper paste, but we're not like, let's all smell like this after breakfast every morning.
I went to a restaurant in San Francisco not very long ago where they served, it was Korean food, and they served this rice dish in an ammo can. It was like they heated up an ammo can and threw all the bibimbap ingredients in there. Bibimbap.
Yeah, you got it. That was perfect.
And then, you stir it up, and it's like the burned stuff at the bottom and all that wonderful, raw egg. It was great, but it was in an ammo can.
I don't think that's a Korean War callback. I think there's something authentic about serving food in ammo cans. Unless I've missed something. But Korean food has kind of taken over the world, and they did it by fusion. Awesome. What if we started frying chicken this way, and a lot of it was borrowing of Western taste, and a lot of it was a Korean diaspora where their people and their chefs went elsewhere. But yeah, in the 1980s, when I was experiencing Korean culture, you would not have convinced me that this was possible, that 20 years or so, that
it's been more than 20 years.
Not really. Okay, yeah. It's true that the Korean takeover of culture happened in the last decade or so.
But it's been more than 20 years since you were in Korea.
Right. I was just thinking what the gap would be, and it's closer to 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
You're right. But it started at the beginning of the 21st century for reasons we'll get into. Like when I lived in Korea in the early 80s, it had not yet had its economic boom. So it was not like you were right. Seoul was not Tokyo.
No, and I think at the time, with our
Hong Kong or
extremely limited and prejudiced view of Asia, Korea was not thought of as a tiger nation.
It wasn't a tiger yet. They hadn't really ramped up their electronics and manufacturing sector. That was beginning. By the time we left in the early 90s, everybody in the U.S. was driving Hyundais and listening to Samsung electronics. So that was ramping up. But when I first got there, Seoul had a couple skyscrapers. A lot of stuff just looked like it did at the end of the war still. It was still a military dictatorship. There was like a 15-year gap with no direct presidential election. There were still monthly curfews when everybody had to head to their air raid shelters.
Really?
Yeah, because the North's right there.
Sure, you got to be ready.
Got to be ready. So once a month, the sirens would blare, and everybody would have to head to their, basements or their subway stations or whatever. And
Do you remember feeling like it was a pregnant threat, that it could happen at any time?
I actually, the funny thing is, I was very aware of kind of general Cold War pregnant threats. And so maybe this was just rounding error, but it didn't seem like this was the thing. Even though people would say, North Korean planes can get to Seoul in, 10 minutes.
Right.
So I think it's just the kind of thing where you shrug and think, yeah, what can you do?
Yeah,
It's like kind of year 3 of COVID thinking. But there hadn't really been much of a Korean diaspora to the rest of the world.
Why would that be?
Again, the isolation. At the time of the Korean War, there were maybe, or even in the years right after the Korean War, there were maybe 25,000 Korean Americans living in this country. Those numbers started to take off pretty quickly with, is it okay to say war bride? Is that a?
That's the phrase that popped into my head before you said it.
Plenty of service members bringing home their spouses they met in Korea.
25,000 is not very many people.
That is not enough to create a thriving immigrant culture or population. And there was also another pipeline of war orphans that certain institutions, including the Korean government, kind of later came to be reliant on and kept propping up, propping up the culture as a source for Western adoption, which is problematic in many ways. But the numbers didn't really boom until, because, Gen X thinks of Korean Americans as a lively immigrant population, if you're in a major city, you'll see a business on every corner that's probably run by a industrious Korean American family. But that all started in 1965 when LBJ kind of liberalized immigration quotas. And as a result, that number has boomed from 25,000 Korean Americans in the mid-20th century to like 2.6 million today. It's literally a factor of 1,000.
I feel like just in my life, my adult life, Koreatown in Los Angeles went from kind of like a strip to being a big hub.
And a destination, because Koreatown now thrives on people who want the delicious fried chicken and corn dogs and other fusion food, and they want the karaoke bars and they want the spas. And but in the 80s, there was in the 80s, Korean American cultural representation is so minimal that they couldn't even really find Korean actors on MASH. If you watch MASH, most of the Asian actors are probably Japanese American.
Right.
And if there is a Korean actor, like you'll see him 8 times playing 8 different parts because there's just so few.
And that was maybe the largest exposure that most Americans had to the idea of Korean culture.
The Korea existed.
Yeah.
And it was just an accident. It was like, we want to do this. It was Altman saying, I want to do this Vietnam parable, but I optioned this book set in the Korean War. This is a way to do it and get around some of the
cultural,
the cultural and political issues. Yeah. But you can't do a show about Korean War doctors without some Korean culture and stuff leaking in.
Yeah.
So that was parts for a few actors, but if not for that, and it's funny, I know Korean Americans from that generation that actually were here at the time, and that was so huge for them that MASH existed.
Really?
I was in LA last year, and I hiked out to the Malibu State Park, which turned out to be where they shot MASH, and you can still see the. There's not a lot of set there, but I think they brought in a Jeep later, and there were just a ton of Korean Americans on the hike because it's exciting for them to see where MASH was filmed. This was like the only place you could see Asian faces on TV.
It would be exciting for me. My dad and I watched it religiously together.
You should go to that state park in Malibu. But, you think about these Korean American audiences hearing their language kind of butchered by Japanese and Chinese and Southeast Asian actors and all their culture misportrayed. And they're still just like,
doesn't matter.
This is better than nothing. Like this is on CBS like once a week. Can you believe this? They're talking about Korea.
I do feel like I gained some, or at least a baseline knowledge of Korea enough that when I learned new things, my whole knowledge of Korea is built on
Built on Hawkeye.
the Lego base of what I learned from MASH.
I do remember when we moved to Korea in 81, we opened our hotel room curtains the next morning, and you could kind of see Seoul is set it's built on hills, and it's set in a mountainous setting. So you can see these kind of rocky, kind of treed hills in the distance. And my dad was like, "It looks like MASH, doesn't it?" And I was like, "It kind of does." So Malibu, not a bad match, it turns out. It's not like Vietnam movies where they shoot them in, Full Metal Jacket shot in Brighton or whatever, and you can't quite get the tropical vibe.
Does Sean Penn yell at Koreans when they try and walk on the beach?
Probably, but that's unrelated. That's just
He just flies there once a year.
Yeah, he'll do it in every country. He'll go to Rio and look for a Korean guy. This might have been the early 80s. There was like one, maybe late 70s, there was one Korean American stand-up named Johnny Yoon, who kind of through happenstance became a favorite of Carson's.
Oh.
I think he was supposed to go on the Tonight Show one night, and somebody bigger canceled. Charlton Heston or somebody canceled. And suddenly, it's Johnny.
He had 20 minutes.
Johnny Yoon improving for 30 minutes. And I think he sings an aria. He's a Korean kid. He probably had violin lessons, and he knew his classical music. And not to generalize, but yeah, he absolutely had classical music.
And after that, Carson was like, I got to get this guy on.
He came on dozens of times, and he had a low-budget movie greenlit that you might have seen about a guy who gets mistaken for a great martial artist called They Call Me Bruce. Are you aware of They Call Me Bruce?
Well, I think aware of, yeah.
Just kind of a VHS. It was the kind of thing where it cost nothing to make. The leading man's a kind of this Korean-American comic that nobody's really heard of. And then it made $16 million or something. It played forever. One of these low-budget, late 70s, early 80s. I think Johnny Yoon's in Cannonball Run, actually.
Okay, yes.
Now I'm speaking your language.
Boing. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But except for that, and all my Korean American friends would be like, Johnny Yoon, because it was literally like, we have representation and it's one guy.
Right.
But we now live in a very different age where it's really unprecedented. A country without any kind of, that's not a geopolitical superpower, has come to dominate world culture in
there are a lot of
7 different areas.
Korean American comedians.
I see Stephen Yeun everywhere.
Female comedians.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Margaret Cho's Korean American, right? Yeah. Am I going to get canceled for saying she is?
I think she is.
I think she is. Come on, Wikipedia.
She better not be from Hong Kong.
Yay, Korean origin.
Yay, hooray.
I was pretty sure. Because I remember that, when she got a sitcom, that might have been, I think that was the first Asian American sitcom, but it was certainly the first Korean American sitcom. It's the concept.
She's my age exactly.
Is that right?
Cho, yeah.
Well, I don't think she's going to be that interested in you. No offense.
Well, no, but I remember when she was coming up on the scene,
right?
And she was like Gen X.
She
lived with a friend of mine.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, my friend Karen and she were tight.
They were.
It doesn't bear on how cool I am, but a little bit.
It doesn't hurt.
A little bit, it does. Yeah.
You're only 2 degrees of separation from Margaret Cho. The concept of exercise, wielding this kind of cultural influence when you're not a geopolitical power is now an academic term, soft power.
Soft power.
And if you think about the 20th century, I can't really think of a good analog. I don't know if it really happened.
Well, my hermit kingdom, I think, exercises soft power.
You're over other nearby homes and businesses?
Well, no. I think you have hard power.
Oh,
and I have soft power. You know what I mean?
Because I have the television airwaves, and you're just yelling over your fence.
You've got money, and you have name recognition. All I have is influence over you
and others.
Well, that's right.
In the Seattle area.
Well, others
hobnobbing at all your Christmas parties.
The 30% of Omnibus listeners that prefer me.
It's up to 30. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
No, I'm sure it's an even 50-50 split.
It's 27.
But if you think about the 20th century, the things that people chase, the French fashions and the British guitar bands and the American hamburgers, and these are all coming from countries that can back up the
Russian political thinking.
Well, that's the thing. The Soviets didn't quite play in that arena, and they would perhaps say it's because it's not compatible with Marxism. And perhaps in hindsight, we would just say, It's just that no one was that interested in their culture.
Well, no, but they really played in the hard power, on the hard power courts.
But is that because soft power wouldn't work? Like, did they realize from the previous century that nobody understood the unique sensibilities of Anton Chekhov?
Well,
they thought something about the Russian soul just cannot be communicated to the West.
I think this is the Berlin Wall problem, which is if you are making an appealing case for your way of life, you don't need to build a wall to keep people in.
But is it that they didn't try for ideological reasons, or is it that is it that the Russian soul is a hard sell culturally?
Boy, every actor I know, every broody Mr. Darcy of the grunge scene found Russian culture and poetry immensely appealing. We
were trying to figure out if they loved their children too.
Right.
It was an open question.
I think it's so goth. It might be appealing, to a goth sensibility.
Is it possible that if they could have just held out for 10 more years, they could have made it? They could have survived Reagan, and they could have just waited for Sisters of Mercy fans to adopt the Russian soul.
I feel like before the collapse of the Soviet Union, we already had Robert Smith wearing an awful lot of eyeliner. And they're loving rockets.
And those kids were still putting up Union Jack flags or whatever instead of Soviet flags.
Yeah, at that point, Russian kids all wanted old Levi's.
They did, and bootleg Michael Jackson tapes. So how did this happen? How did Korea go from like one stand-up comic rounding up in 1980 to basically controlling every cultural genre and medium today?
So it wasn't just one like super important pivot person, right?
You can't point to it. I mean, really, it's not Gangnam Style.
Although that was,
I'm sure it helps.
That was the first billion seller, right?
Yeah. But that's not where the story started. And that certainly did not convert billions of people to be like, I'm going to watch Squid Game because I liked Gangnam Style.
So what was it?
I have a friend who wrote a book on this, actually. A girl I went to high school with who used to write very flowery essays in the school paper, became a writer. And she wrote a book, I think it's called The Birth of the Korean Cool, or maybe that's the subtitle. I'm not sure. And she sent me an early copy and wanted me to blurb it. And I was traveling and didn't get to it. To this day, I feel bad about it. So if there's people listening who would have read Uni Hong's book about Hallyu, if I had blurbed it, please.
You're blurbing it now.
I'm blurbing it now. Please go buy a copy. And her argument, I mean, it's tempting to say, as we were talking about the Russian soul, it's tempting to say there's something about the Korean soul whose time had come, right? That's usually how these arguments are made. Biographies of the Beatles often start with the Irish immigration to Liverpool after the war and all of this. And, there's always a sense that the world is finally ready for whatever the new thing is.
When I think about Korea's relationship to Japan and how fraught it is and how...
That's big.
How, that the rapprochement between those two nations...
They were annexed by Japan in 1905.
And
the bad
brutalized.
And really, the bad blood exists to this day.
Right. And there's still a lot of prejudice in Japan against Koreans, and there's a lot of... There's a lot
of resentment in Korea, too.
Yeah, a lot of resentment. But there's also a large Korean diaspora in Japan, right?
Yeah, it's one of the larger destinations. And it's probably just because before Korea, Japan was the center of that regional capital for both trade and everything else.
But I do think of the rise of Korean culture as being related somewhat to the mass acceptance of Japanese culture.
It's related in two ways. I think one is in the 90s, Koreans watching their cultural enemies in Japan become, big players on the world stage with their
Pokemons,
with their anime and their Pokemons and whatnot. And thinking not just like, well, we could do that too, but also like, wouldn't it be great to beat the Japanese at their own game?
Yeah.
But second is there is kind of an Koreans often point to this internal soulful quality they have that comes from over a century of persecution. They call it the Han. It's often translated as grief or sorrow, but really there's elements of, rancor and resentment there as well, that we've been put upon for decades by all kinds of larger oppressors, wedged here between China and Japan as we are, and then Western interlopers as well. And we've just kind of had to sit there and seethe. And this is something you see in our art.
It's so apparent in the music video of Gangnam Style, not to keep coming back to it, that Psy is very cynical.
That's true.
But I don't see it in
K-pop,
BTS.
Yeah, K-pop videos are, I mean, it's a melange of things, but I wouldn't say, and they're built on the roots of Korean traditional music to some degree, I understand, but I don't think you see a lot of geopolitical rancor or deep cultural seething there.
No, or even inner doubt.
I guess in the noir movies, there are kind of hairpin turns of genre where there will be slapstick comedy 1 second, and then the cop will just smash somebody's head, a suspect's head through a window the next, because he's
hard.
Yeah, he's hard boiled and he's on a hair trigger.
Right.
But again, these are tropes that you could see in a Western detective movie too. So I don't know how much I believe
in Han.
I believe that it exists. I don't know how well it explains Hallyu.
I see.
And in Uni's book, I think she points to actually the things that are easier that are a little less hand wavy. Mostly the fact that Korea actually had a national strategy to take over world popular culture from the 90s on.
Is that right? An articulated strategy?
Pretty much. I mean, it's a society that's always valued culture. When I lived there in the 80s, you would often see as a slogan or a motto or a kind of a propaganda piece that Korea was the product of 5,000 years of culture.
Yeah.
They were very proud of their ancient, and as a kid, I could not have been less interested. Because to me, when I heard that catchphrase, it just meant we were going to have to make kites with a hole in the middle in art class, or we were going to get taken to a museum with a lot of Celadon earthenware.
But like Japanese culture, weren't the first 3,000 years of those just Chinese culture?
Right. Yeah. So, Korea is very closely linked to the Confucian and Chinese culture it comes out of. So I think they would agree that 5,000 years of culture includes a lot of Chinese influence. But just that, anciently there are people who does value that kind of achievement. And
anciently there are people that does value that kind of achievement.
There's a famous story in the 90s, I think, and I think this is true, of Kim Young-sam, the president of Korea, being shown numbers about how much money Jurassic Park made.
Okay.
And it was like, they just made as much as 1.5 million Hyundais. Do you know how much money we put into making sure the West buys 1.5 million Hyundais?
Right.
We could have just made a dinosaur movie. Think about that.
It was our entire defense budget. And it was just one dumb dinosaur movie. Wow.
And this really kind of lodges in the heads of the decision makers okay, we're never, even if we can get our nice compact cars and Walkmans out there, we're not going to compete with ICBMs, but we could compete with dinosaur movies. Why not? And so Korea starts doing some very smart cultural things at the governmental level. There are quotas in theaters for homegrown movies, much as Canada does.
What does that mean, quotas?
You can only show a certain number of foreign movies.
Right.
N% of your screens have to be showing this. N% of your TV airwaves have to be showing local content.
Canada has that with
CanCon.
With bands on their popular radio.
CanCon.
Yeah. Is that what it's called? CanCon?
It's short for Canadian content. Or is it content, I think? It's just, legally it's mandated that you have to listen to the Tragically Hip a certain number of hours a day.
That's exactly right.
Or they throw you across the border. Budgets were increased for all kinds of local concert halls and auditoriums and cultural centers just to encourage a new generation to discover this. Lots of money for startups in the cultural space. And this has continued to this. I mean, now once it works, it becomes a snowballing effect. And now Korea basically has a cabinet level minister of Hallyu. There's an agency of external cultural influence in South Korea, which I don't know if any other country has. And the thing is, this cannot be the decision maker because lots of countries tried this before and since and at the same time. Like, how do we make our culture catch on? I'm sure Azerbaijan is worried about this right now. And I'm sure Niger is, has a bunch of people sitting in a room wondering how they can get the West interested in our culture and so forth. But
I'm not sure Niger does.
Maybe not
But
Niger.
maybe Azerbaijan.
Uruguay does.
I'm watching out the window. We've got some ice on the ground. I'm watching someone try and get a Prius up an icy slope, and they are not succeeding.
Oh, no.
It's sliding sideways. And
there was no attempt to put the Prius up on the street before?
Well, no.
This is your neighbors, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, I watched it come down the hill earlier, and now it's trying to get up the hill, and it's sliding sideways. That's not relevant or barely relevant.
I would say barely is doing a lot of work in that sentence.
Try and really loop it back in.
So much as the ice on your driveway keeps that Prius from getting out, lots of cultural factors keep Uruguayan or Azerbaijani culture Azeri culture from being internationally adopted with the same enthusiasm with which K-pop and Squid Game are.
Well done. So how did Korea overcome these international roadblocks?
If I had to put my money on a theory,
Get that Prius up the icy driveway.
it would be Prius related. It would be technology.
Uh-huh.
Korea famously, do you know this about Korea, that they're like the most online nation?
I didn't know.
They have the fastest internet on earth, most people online, the most highest smartphone adoption. And this was true very early. They are early adopters of tech, particularly internet age tech. And it's because they saw it coming and they planned for it. In the 80s, their manufacturing center was aligned toward electronics, and they saw the internet coming and thought, maybe we're a small regional power in a geopolitical sense, but in the cyber world, size is different.
Has social media broken their social contract like it has here?
Social media is actually what led to the explosion of a lot of these things. K-pop bands were very early in engaging with fans online and saying, hey, vote in this poll. And, there's going to be online exclusives. And here's a little interview with, I don't want to make up names of K-pop band members. That
the
seems
blonde
problematic.
one.
The blonde one, the one with the little heart beauty mark. And that was just one of many different ways in which there was an attempt to colonize the digital world.
Right.
And that seems to have, so that's one way in which a country can have outsized influence, is if they're disproportionately online.
And
Whereas in America, the people who are disproportionately online just ruin their lives.
Yeah, right. It seems fairly benign to say, vote who your favorite member of this band is, than to say, vote whether you think the presidential election was legitimate.
Yeah, they were doing it in fun ways.
Yeah, vote whether you think I should keep being the CEO of Twitter.
And it seems like, and this is just me talking off the top of my head here, but it seems like assimilation was a big part of it. As we've said, that the Korean foods that everyone loves in LA, you can now find them in Seoul, but
the fusion foods have gone back.
I couldn't buy, they have, absolutely. But I couldn't buy gochujang fried chicken in Korea in 1985.
Did you try?
You know what? I could have tried harder. In hindsight, I could have tried harder. But I was a slacker Gen X teen.
There you go.
And, I had MTV to watch.
Right.
More than I wanted to eat gochujang fried chicken. The Korean bands are not, they may have some elements of Korean music, but they sound much more like trap, or a melange of trap and indie pop and Middle Eastern music and 6 other things, more than they sound like anything that I would have thought of as Korean music 50 years ago.
So does Korea have a special relationship with the United States, or are they doing like China's doing and trying to develop global?
Well, I think their music appeal, the art appeals everywhere. I think. I mean, the reason why the special U.S. relation is just where the diaspora ended. Most of the, I don't know if you're still allowed to say kyopo, which when I was a kid was the term for Korean overseas nationals, and now I think is a little bit generational and old fashioned. But whatever the correct term is for, the vast majority of them are in the U.S.
Right.
Or maybe not the majority, but a huge plurality of them are in the U.S. So there's that back and forth cross pollination that happens. But I think those K-pop bands sell huge in China. I think they're very carefully designed in an Archie's-like way,
and in
to have
Japan,
broad international appeal, and of course, huge in Japan.
Which is great. That kind of the
That's
ultimate
the
goal,
revenge, yeah.
right? Like,
you cut down all our trees, and you made our women, you trafficked our women, and you did all this, but you're listening to Blackpink now, b****s.
Yeah.
And I have Korean American friends for whom this is a real victory lap. I have Korean American friends that will text me every time something good happens to a Korean movie or a Korean band or something.
Do they text you other times too, or just
It's
then?
just that. We have a special group chat just for your white culture is in decline. And I shrug and say, you got me.
Once again.
It is. You're right. You're not wrong. But I've heard other Korean diaspora folks say they kind of dislike the potential for fetishization or tokenizing that comes with the same way that a bunch of white people think they understand Japanese culture, or I guess before that in America, a bunch of white kids in the mall thinking they understood hip hop culture.
Well, or yeah, that every Italian is a member of the mafia,
Right.
or every Irish person is a drunk cop.
And I have friends whose kids are like, the only place I want to go on vacation is Korea, and it's because that's where I can hang out with Blackpink, and and
Every Korean is an androgynous great dancer.
right, exactly. And so it all gets caught up with the image of your nation. So assimilation with the West is kind of a touchy and important issue when you talk about how Korea took over. Did it do it by compromising any essential values? Did it just do it by beating the West at its own game? Is there a complicated fusion going on? And that finally brings us to our New Year's topic today.
45 minutes in.
But I think this will be quicker. That was all important background. But this is a story that's been in the news recently, but it's something I was aware of my whole life. I would ask my friends as a kid how old they were. And, because that's important when you're a kid, who's had a birthday yet or who's turned whatever. And they would explain to me that, well, what do you mean, Korean age or American age? And I thought this was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. Age is age, right?
Age is age, as we always say.
So it was a very important, that famous saying. It was a very broadening moment for me to realize that even things I thought of as just simple baseline math are actually pretty culturally colored. How does age operate in your life?
So if they weren't talking to you, if it was another Korean person, they just would have answered.
Yeah, they would have
their
said,
Korean
they
age.
would have given their sol, I guess, the number of sol or years elapsed. But
Weirdly, I think age is such a preoccupation in the United States. Like you understand if somebody's 9 years old and their friend is 10 years old, that's significant to note.
You mean among kids?
No, I mean among adults here.
I see.
It seems like in 1940, everybody that was over 18 was considered an adult.
Well, it's because
And-
they all looked 45 because they were smoking so much.
Well, yeah, and they started to work, and
they all had 6 kids.
yeah, then they were at work, right? So the difference between being 40 and 45 meant nothing.
Yeah, I don't hear much about that in the 30s about like, well, of course you like that Fitzgerald novel. You're in your 30s.
Yeah, exactly. But
I read
now,
Booth Tarkington.
like somebody could make a supercut of all the times you and I have discussed the incredible age gap that exists between us.
Born in 69 versus 74.
Yeah, which 68, I'll have you know.
Oh, wow.
Johnson administration.
Congrats.
Thanks. Just the last 2 months of the Johnson administration, but still.
Do you feel like he left office because you were born?
No, he had already made the decision to leave office, but I feel like I'm the first of the new generation.
If you'd been a better baby, do you think he would have changed his mind and run again?
I don't think I could have been a better baby.
Fine, blame Vietnam.
You know what? I was ruined by the culture. But I do think we are obsessed with it, and we talk about generations so much. And I mean, I'm guilty of it as much as anyone, because we identify so much with the popular culture of the moment. I don't think popular culture changed so fast in the 1870s.
It was just the discovery that you could sell more stuff if the vibe changed as fast as hemlines.
But I really do feel like the difference between you and me comes up all the time, generationally. But I don't think it can't possibly matter.
There is this other kind of converse thing where the older you get, because kids are just obsessed with when they're turning 7. I'm 6.5. No, I'm 6.5. Whereas I have to reconstruct my age now by subtracting from the year I was born. I have no idea how old I am. I'm 48.
But when I was in my 20s, I remember having friends in my 30s and feeling like, yeah, that's right. I'm a grown-up now, and so are they. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But I think now those people are in their 60s, and I would feel more of a gulf now when I should feel less of a gulf.
In East Asia, for centuries, the actual common way of reckoning someone's age has been very different from ours.
Go on.
And most other countries moved away from this older system after contact with the West. And Korea is kind of the last man standing.
Is it because the Western system was better, or is it because it was just like, meh, whatever, doesn't matter?
It's probably just cultural imperialism, and it's more like these records are going to be very confusing. Let's all let's all jump in. I mean, in the case of Japan, I'm sure it's let's jump into the future.
Right.
Other countries may have had gunboats in their rivers and whatnot.
Ataturk saying like, oh, we're going to use the Roman alphabet now, even though it's completely incomprehensible to.
It's okay. We'll put a lot of little squiggles under some of the consonants. It's going to be fine.
Should make perfect sense.
In this traditional system, when you are born, a baby that is born is assigned, in Korea, Hansal, you're 1 year old.
At birth.
At birth.
Why?
Interesting question. Probably the central question here. And the system is so old, it's impossible to answer.
It's hard to be 0.
Well, that's an issue. Like, could this system be so old that it predates the common use of 0 in math in this part of the world?
Right.
And therefore, you can't say a baby's 0. So the first number then is 1. We'll just say the baby's 1. You know, coming from a country we're a post-0 nation. We're only 200 odd years old. We've always had 0. We count on it.
Yeah. Lol. But we haven't always had 0, but
the Pilgrims wrote 1620 on Plymouth Rock, and they weren't like, what's that circle at the end?
Right. We've had 0 for a long time.
My hero, 0.
We're pros at 0, basically.
But there was no 0.
If you got 5,000 years of culture, you predate 0, baby.
Right.
So there could be an element of that. There also could be, it's possible that it could be cultural thought related to gestation, taking into account the time the baby was in the womb.
Oh, I see.
Just, you know, kind of a life starts at conception banner, billboard, but on a continental scale. You know, the story of this baby did not begin when it happened to emerge into the oxygen. It was months ago.
Yeah, the story of this baby.
This is the story of a kid, but it's not just being born at 0. If it was that, the system would be easy enough to change. You just somebody tells you their age and you subtract 1 and you're like, oh, I see. In my culture, we would say you are 26.
But it's not just that.
No, there is an additional level of complexity, which is your age changes not on your birthday, but at the new year.
So if you are born in December, you are 1, and then you immediately are 2.
If you were born December 31st, you could be 2 days old by our reckoning and 2 years old by Korean reckoning.
But where is Korean New Year?
Well, that's the thing. This traditionally, the rollover time, when everybody's odometer rolls over at once, would have been Lunar New Year. When the calendrical system changed with Western contact, they actually switched it. They actually modernized to, we're going to use our same system, but the rollover is January 1. So, yeah, in Korea, you could be born on December 31st and be 2 days old to us, 2 years old to them. And the funny thing is, they still, you know, birthdays are still important there. It's not that everybody's birthday is celebrated on January 1st and there's a big nationwide birthday party on January 1st. I mean, if anything, birthdays, my experience, are maybe more important there. You know, babies have there's a traditional 21-day birthday for a 3-week-old baby.
Whoa.
Called seire, which is kind of
lived.
I mean, actually, that's later. I mean, that's more like, we hope you live. Like the mom did great. Welcome.
Right.
You know, here's some rice cakes. Then the you lived one is actually on day 100 on Baekgil. It's like, you did it. You lived. Now nicer rice cakes and, you know, a cute little outfit for the baby. Many Korean or Korean Americans will have pictures of themselves in a very ornate traditional outfit as a baby sitting in a chair looking at the camera. You may have seen one.
Yeah, and that's 9 months.
That's 100 days.
100
so
days.
It would be like a 3-month photo. And then birthdays are celebrated annually up until, I think this is something that's diminishing importance, but Hwangap, the 60th birthday, was a big deal because
they threw you in a volcano.
there was they took you to Jeju and threw you in a volcano. No, it was just rare to live to 60 in an agrarian culture, you know, 500 years ago. So that was the big...
You made it.
Yeah, every birthday is you made it, I guess, in a subsistence culture.
But it's a very important birthday, but it was not a time when the odometer clicked over.
Yeah, the odometer clicking is something... we assume that age and birthdays are connected because it's reinforced in so many little ways, the number of candles on the cake and so forth. And you actually realize, oh no, this is a culture where these are two different things.
Yeah.
There's the birth anniversary and then there's age. And why should they have to be the same? It is kind of cool that everybody, for legal reasons, let me see, there's also this hybrid. So just to jump ahead a bit, they do understand that system is not understood in the West and is therefore considered a little antiquated. So Koreans are also aware of their Monnai, their age by foreign reckoning. And then there's a third hybrid system where you are still, you're not 1 at birth, you're 0 at birth, but the rollover does still happen on January 1. And that's used for a lot of official stuff like which class year students land in primary and secondary education, when your military conscription kicks in. Like age, according for lots of governmental reasons, hinges on this hybrid system that still begins at age 1.
This may be partly because I don't eat breakfast, but I'm having a hard time doing the math. What is the largest actual age gulf that two people with the same age in Korean reckoning, old Korean reckoning, could be?
The actual chronological difference, but they have the same number of sol?
Yeah, who is the youngest person and the oldest person that could both be 17?
I don't think it's that different. You know, our primary schools also have to pick a bright line, and that means some kids in the class are about a year older than others.
But if you were born on January 1 of one year and December 31st of the following year, you'd add and subtract a thing and then plus another thing. And
I think it might still be, the gap might not be that much different. I think it might still just be a year. Is that right? If I'm born on December 31st of one year and you're born January 1st, a year and a day later,
you are 2 and I'm only 1, but you are only 10 days older than me, right? Because you were born on December 31st, you're 1 at birth, then you turn 2 on New Year's. I mean, I'm born the next day and I'm 1.
You can take 1 at birth out of the equation because everybody has that.
Right.
You can ignore that. So I think it really is not any different from our standing where people born effectively a day apart could still be in different grades. That happens in our system.
Yeah.
And people born effectively a year apart could be in the same grade. And people born 2 years apart, let's say I'm born on January 1st of a year. And then you're born on... No, I mean, that's the same. That's just a 1 year gap. I don't think it introduces anything. But a lot of the pushback to this system has been based on the idea that, you know, academic achievement or whatever varies within grades, but that's not going to be fixed.
No.
Until
every student has a personalized education brought to you by social media.
You could still have homeschooling.
No, please.
I mean, there was the thing in Freakonomics where it turned out that like 80% of all hockey players were born in certain months, and it's just because they were the bigger kids in their Canadian or Minnesota
I read that book.
Elementary to high schools, and therefore, and I think there are some connections with academic achievement, but I mean, the thing that happens there is that everybody, you and your whole cohort change age at once. If the government is using January 1st as its cutoff for who can go to a bar,
right,
then it's no longer who in my class can go to the bar. It's none of us can, and then tomorrow everybody can. So that's kind of fun. When you think about what this gives you, starting at 1 and then moving up every January 1st or every new year at least, really what's being counted is the number of calendar years this person has experienced. Like when a Korean person says, I'm 27 in Korean age and I'm 25 in your age, it might just mean I have not yet hit my 26th anniversary of my birth, but I've been around for 27 calendar years.
It's why I say I was born in the Johnson administration.
Yeah, you have a tiny bit of Johnson legacy.
Yeah, there are all these people that were born in 1968, but they're living in a Nixon world. But he hasn't been inaugurated yet.
But you've got a tiny bit of Johnson in you.
I do.
Right now.
Just a tiny bit, but enough.
Just the tip.
Oof.
The Chinese zodiac, I think, is a big part of this.
Okay.
Like think about how much of our birthday commemoration revolves around the specific date of the year. And that ties into the way our horoscopes work, right? Like,
what's your horoscope? I mean, what's your sign?
I was at dinner the other night.
What's your sign?
I was at dinner the other night, and I think about astrology hardly ever, but I was at dinner the other night, and one of us was having a really hard time ordering. And the other couple, the husband couldn't order, and the wife was like, "You're such a Gemini." And I was like, I was suddenly panic stricken because I'm a Gemini.
Oh.
And I just learned about myself that I have a hard time ordering from a large menu.
And so did you suddenly start to doubt your choice?
I did. Well, actually, things started to make sense because I do have a hard time ordering. So I guess I now believe in astrology.
You're like, I was going to get the nachos, but maybe the steak tartare?
So I'm a Gemini, whatever that means.
Okay. I'm a Virgo.
Do you feel like people say, yeah, you're such a Virgo?
Yeah. Well, back in the day, when I was a member of a modern primitive culture, a lot of people would actually say like, "Are you a Virgo?"
They would just guess it?
Yeah, based on something I would say or do, they'd be like, "Are you?" And I'd be like, "Yeah," and they're like, "I knew it." But then there were also people that said, "Oh, Virgo men and Virgo women are completely different, and Virgo men are like somehow like eye-rollingly the worst of a certain kind of thing."
So that tracks.
Just like, yeah, exactly. True again.
But it goes back to religious, the kind of the Christian tradition of having a saint's day. In many Christian cultures, for a long time, people would have the name of the saint on their day, or they would celebrate their birthday and the saint whose name day they took. The liturgical calendar was based a lot on birthdays in a calendar year. And when you think about Asia, it's the opposite. Like all of their astrological thinking revolves around not what month or what day you were born, but what year.
Oh, sure.
Are you year of the dog? Are you year of the rooster?
What are you?
Tiger, I think.
I'm monkey, which again confirms.
I literally have to have the Chinese restaurant menu in front of me to remember the order. I don't know. So again, that's you're the important personality traits and the destinies that come to you by virtue of your birthday. We accord on a time of the year.
Yeah.
So it makes sense for them to assign people to how many. You want to be assigned to the zodiac year you were born. And what's important is how many of those you've lived through or accumulated, because you're working your way through a cycle. There's 12 animal signs, of course, but then for each of them, there's earth, wood, metal, fire, and water. So there's this 60-year sexagenary cycle, which I think is part of the reason why Juan Gap is celebrated. It's not just that, you've lived a long life. It's like you've now lived through one of each kind of Chinese year there is. So that's what's being counted in this reckoning.
I found a desk calendar that was also a pen holder from the Soviet Union the other day, and bought it. And it the desk calendar was designed so that it was on a 28-year cycle, where the calendar you would move this wheel, that wheel, and this wheel, and you could continue to use it throughout the 28-year cycle. And the reason I bought it was obviously because it was written in the Soviet language.
Was it still valid?
But it started in 1967. That's when this was made. And and this year was, I could use this for the next 28 years, I guess.
Oh, is 2023 a 1967?
Yeah. And so, is that right?
Maybe.
Well, who knows? I may have all of those numbers wrong.
I mean, you have the leap year screwing it up, right?
But whatever it was, this year, I looked it up, and this year is the first year on the desk calendar. It also has a Soviet rocket launching into space on it, and several other.
I can't believe you didn't already have
icons.
6 of these.
I know. Well, I'd never seen it before. I didn't, and then of course I tried to explain it to my kid, and she was like, "I really wish I had a different dad."
Once again,
for whatever reason,
this is why Russia lost the Cold War. They didn't have soft power. Nobody wanted their calendars.
The problem is I don't read Soviet, so I can't tell what the months are. So I have to now go annotate it.
The problem with the Korean age reckoning, well, I mean, not the problem. I mean, it's internally consistent.
The problem with it colliding with our age reckoning.
That is the problem. If, it hits our dumb Kevin derived day of the week of the year age reckoning, and then something's got to give. And what happened for many years was these three parallel systems. You would have your Korean age, you would have your Western age, and then you would have this hybrid one that determined a lot of your regulatory thing. The problem is age is super important in Korean culture by virtue of the relationships that get created between people. Like the honorifics you would use to address someone or to refer to them change based on who's older in the conversation. Oh. So it's kind of the equivalent of a, let's have a pronoun conversation first. In Korea, the equivalent is, often conversations have to begin with, let's figure out which of us is older, so I know if I should call you Hyung or whatever, And so are there distinctions made when both people have the same age? Do they then get, I don't know how granular it gets, but if the problem is if two people are considering their age by different systems,
oh, sure.
Then it just complicates this. How are we talking about each other? Wait, do you mean is that Monai or is that?
They don't default to a second system like who's bigger.
Yeah, that's what you should do. Tie is broken by, and then it's like 10 things. Then it's like whose internet is fastest,
Right.
who has the best StarCraft scores.
Can you grow a mustache?
Gets all the way down to coin flip. And there was just a lot of complexities to having two systems. People who increasingly in a global world, these are people interfacing with the West, which means they have one age at work and one at home,
Ooh.
which seems a little schizophrenic.
Did Korea have they probably didn't have a 7-day week?
Oh, that's a
prior
good question.
to-
When was the adoption of the 7-day week in Asia? I don't know. Someone should tell us.
Yeah, maybe that's another omnibus.
Korea and the 7-day. I was just noticing that despite the fact that I spent my whole childhood in Korea, I think we have not talked about Korea since like 5 years ago. I did a show on some weird Korean emigration to Kazakhstan or Georgia or something.
We were always going to do something about Korean fan death, but we never did. That's on both of our lists.
I think that got too famous in the West. That's probably like more famous as a Western punchline than it is as a Korean superstition at this point, right?
What's your Korean age?
Oh, let's see. Well, I would just be a year. It hasn't been the new year yet, and I would just be 1 year older, so I'd be 49.
So that never came up.
No, people knew I didn't have a Korean age. I was blonde, blue-eyed kid. But with all my friends, they'd have to give me 2 ages, and even at the time, I was like, I don't know what that means, and they would be like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like there was some sense that they were, as third culture kids, kind of at home in neither system. They were also a little at sea and did not want to have to explain the intricacies of Confucian age reckoning to me.
But because this show is airing after the new year, it's now 2023.
Happy
you are
birthday.
technically 50 years old.
It's true. Happy birthday to all our Korean listeners.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Well, actually, that has changed somewhat. There are late breaking developments here, and this is so. Some of our listeners may be aware of this Korean age reckoning just because it's been in the AP and the New York Times and the BBC in the last year or so.
Our listeners get all their news from Omnibus.
In 2019, it's true. If you're living in 5,000 years, you don't know about any of this. But in 2019, a Korean parliamentary committee in the National Assembly finally decided for the first time to officially ponder, return an answer to the question, should there be Korean age? And it has big implications because everybody in Korea is going to de-age a year or two the second they pull that switch. Everybody's going to Benjamin Button, and all the 50-year-olds are 49. And
Is it a Y2K problem where stuff is built around it that will all come crashing down?
You would definitely have to grandfather in, all the existing laws that say you do the military at 19. It's going to be like, and as of January 1, 2020, whatever it is, you'll do the military at age 18. You'd have to change all the things. That's an interesting question, though. I think the director Chris Marker once said that in the 19th century, mankind had come to terms with space. Whereas in the 20th century, the great problem was the coexistence of different systems of time. And I had never thought about it that way, but certainly I can think of cases where that is true. And today the new frontier is, even though time travel has not been invented, there are questions like Y2K that really do revolve around how our machines count time. There's the securities trading issues of how much latency there is. I think now there are systems that can give you updated stock prices within 20 nanoseconds of the exchange deciding to change them.
I'm glad that all the quantum technology is devoted,
That's what it's going into.
devoted to making sure that securities traders...
Making sure that somebody with a 200 nanosecond latency can't get defrauded by somebody with a 20 nanosecond latency. Because that's what happens. If the old price is still in this city, but the new price is in this city, suddenly a computer can find ways to leverage that tiny half-second gap, and there's an arbitrage opportunity. The country of Samoa, a few years ago, decided to move to the other side of the international date line.
Yeah, I remember that.
Obviously, they can't move the island.
Right. They just moved the line, but that line's already pretty squiggly.
They can just anybody, I guess, can add a little angle to the international date line. And they did it for cultural reasons. They were like, increasingly, we're part of the Asia-Pacific sphere. Like, America's in decline. China's not. We would rather not be on the same day as California. It would be easier for us to be on the same business day as Australia, New Zealand, China, etc. And so that was probably the beginning of the end for America, with Samoa deciding we don't even want to be the same day as you, bro.
And does that include American Samoa? Also switched over, or is
Oh
there,
no, I don't think so.
So they're now a whole day apart.
I think you're right. I think the nation of Samoa, the independent nation of Samoa, might be a day apart from Pongo Pongo.
Yeah, just maybe even that played a major role in it. Like, no, you guys.
But Korea is now on this forefront. You know, they're completing this 20th century quest of reconciling different systems of time.
So the legislature did pull the trigger on it, and then when does it come into effect?
In 2022, President Yoon Suk-yeol was elected with a promise to do away with Korean age reckoning.
That's so funny because when was the last time somebody was elected on an anti-nationalism platform?
Would you? Well, it's not anti. Well, I guess it's kind of anti-nationalism. Right? I was just thinking it would be funny if an American political candidate ran on the platform of "I will make you 1 year younger."
Yeah, right.
And it passed the National Assembly just this month, and now traditional ages will no longer be used in any official capacity as of next June.
And you will not change birthdays on January 1st, too?
I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
But yes.
It's just now all of a sudden your birthday is going to be the day you change.
To the government, your age will not change on January 1. Your age will change on the anniversary of your birth. So one last gasp, I guess, for Western civilization, even as we're losing Samoa, we did at least we made all the members of BTS a year younger.
I mean, I can always say that 54 is the new 34.
Well, in Korea, 53 is the new 54.
And that concludes Korean Age. Entry 692.JB1117. Certificate number 38756 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media will still exist in your era, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project. I don't know. There's no place for us to have a TikTok, is there? Or a Snapchat? Those things are not for
We could, but which of us would
enterprises.
start it? I found out that H&R Block has a TikTok, and they were dunking on me with it.
What?
Because I got their question wrong on Jeopardy in 2004, and suddenly the H&R Block TikTok is having some fun at my expense.
But the thing is, you have H&R Block tax work in perpetuity, right? Didn't they promise you that?
I have H&R Block perks,
and they'll just
but
keep
apparently
doing it.
the price of that is them roasting me on Block Talk.
Well, how could you have lost on Jeopardy? You are the host of it.
Now I can neither win nor lose. I both win and lose Jeopardy every night. I'm Schrodinger's host.
Anyway, you can see our increasingly declining contributions to social media at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. Hang out with other Futurelings on Facebook as Futurelings. On my Patreon the other day, there was a thread of people saying that they were not members of the Facebook Futureling group, but they still felt connected to being Futureling. They would still describe themselves as Futurelings because they talked on patreon.com/John Roderick. So if you're against Facebook.
Should they just go to patreon.com/omnibus project, though, when you think about it?
Oh, yeah, that's an option. You can send us actual mail at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. Sounds like you're opening some packages, Ken.
Oh, I'm belatedly getting all our Christmas cards from Tess and Bill, but more like their cats.
Oh, yeah, cats.
From the Callings, from the Gettys.
The Gettys?
I don't think so.
I hope they're members of our Patreon.
I don't think the Gettys go to the Walgreen photo counter to do their Christmas card, right?
Perhaps not.
Probably not.
I'm not sure. They probably assign somebody to do it, and I bet they go to Walgreens.
No, you get
and skim the cash.
Get a handmade etching from them.
Maybe.
The Callings are actually a family that shows them on their Christmas card. But we have all three kinds represented. The
Callings have a new baby, looks like.
Yes, they do, but they also included the parents. The Sullivans are the kind of family that only puts their cats on their Christmas card.
Those are some chonky cats.
They are. It's Pippi and Buster. And the Gettys appear to be the kind of family that only put their kids
Oh, sure.
on their Christmas
That's
card.
all you really care
So
about.
all the faiths have been represented.
Two beautiful babies.
We also got, for whatever reason, as you might recall, we're on the mailing list of the Center for Land Use Interpretation in Venice, on Culver City. We recently promoted their new exhibit about water towers, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
But this is their end of year, why aren't you donating to us card, which fair enough.
We must have gotten a few of those from the Kentucky Colonels.
Think of the cash value we're providing by just saying their name.
Oh, I know.
All the time.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing.
We're probably their highest donor.
Yeah, we're influencers.
In a way. And then from Lily in Tennessee. This is actually...
Came with a package.
This is Lily, whom I know, I believe. It's a Tennessee-themed care package that includes a Dollywood postcard, which has a train, and Lily points out is therefore omnibusy. And...
some of her garbage.
Well, it's both the packaging and the contents, but deconstructed. A Jeopardy clue, an actual Jeopardy clue from 2000. This marshmallow sandwich from the Chattanooga Bakery, a favorite in the South with RC Cola, has been around since 1917. Can you respond correctly about this Tennessee baked good?
What is a Malamar?
So close. The Malamar,
moon
Tennessee
pie.
would be the moon pie. And she sent us some, this must be a holiday flavor, mint chocolate moon pie minis. Did you know that moon pies, I have another card here, moon pies come in 7 flavors now?
I didn't know that.
I thought moon pies were chocolate only.
I didn't really know anything about moon pies.
But welcome to the 21st century where even in the South, they have discovered salted caramel and pumpkin spice.
Interesting.
I
ate ho-hos and ding-dongs.
I, too, am a Hostess family. I don't even understand the Little Debbie cinematic universe.
Me either.
I'm at sea, but these moon pies. So it looks like Lily sent us the packaging so we can enjoy it, but then shrink and bubble wrap the moon pies to better protect them.
Keep them fresh.
Yes. Oh, wait, are there multiple flavors here?
Is this like the time I tweeted at Doritos and they sent me a box with all of their different flavors?
That happened to me once with Chex Mix.
You got all the different flavors of Chex Mix?
Including some that I didn't think existed, like maybe straight from the lab. Oh, wow. Lily has sent us every flavor of moon pie. Is that true? I see chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, banana, chocolate mint, but possibly not the fancy flavors. Maybe no pumpkin spice or salted caramel. Maybe they're seasonal.
I'll take the chocolate and chocolate mint if you want the banana and mango.
I see. Hey, if you'll take the bad flavors, Ken, I'll take the good ones. I think we should cut each one in half.
Oh, sure.
Have you ever had a
cut
moon
the
pie?
baby in two?
Have you ever had a moon pie? Oh no, salted caramel and pumpkin spice are represented here.
I've eaten so many terrible regional things that I think I probably have had a moon pie.
I am tossing you a moon pie, so now you can try one on air. I'm going to try one of the yuppie flavors here.
So we're not going to cut these in two. I don't see any flavor on the. Oh, it's written on it. She wrote it on it.
Yeah, she has a.
This is chocolate. Whoops.
Let's try salted caramel moon pie. So I'm not much of a marshmallow guy.
Yeah, me either.
But luckily, I mean, 1980s era Korea's other gift to popular culture was the choco pie from Orion.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And it's basically a bigger moon pie.
Okay, I'm eating the chocolate one.
I like them. They're not overly marshmallowy.
No, you can really taste the preservatives.
The marshmallow just adds a layer of softness, which you need because the wafer's kind of dry, but I like the frosting. This is good. I like my bougie salted caramel moon pies from Chattanooga.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure.
Are you anti moon pie?
No, I'm not going to say anti. You know, it's situational, right? Like if you were in a Cormac McCarthy novel and somebody gave you these, you'd be like, thank the Lord. But
I want to get a sun pie and make an eclipse.
If there was a box of Girl Scout cookies here and a box of moon pies, I think I'd reach for the Girl Scout cookies. If there was a jar of Frangos.
Do I have to do the outro through a full mouth? Have you finished?
Oh, no,
your thing?
I have not. I would just encourage people.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, Lily. And thank you, everyone who sent us a Christmas card. I'd like to encourage everyone to support the show by going to patreon.com/omnibus and, patreon.com/omnibus project and make a generous contribution, and it will help us continue to do the show. This episode is the first after it heralds the transition to once a week.
Yeah, this is our first weekly show. We're now a Thursday show, apparently.
A Thursday show. So I think that...
And we've shaken up the Patreon tiers a little bit in order to make sure that they scale with a new 52 show year instead of 104 show year. But that means the dawning of a pretty cool new perk.
Age of Aquarius.
Yeah, if you are giving at a certain level, check out the new Patreon tiers and see if you would like to stretch your omnibus dollar. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe may never come. If the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But we wish you many goods and moon pies. And if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.